This week, Snapchat published one of their amazing reports, which they do regularly, and I'm very fond of, because they really try to go deep in providing the reassurance and the metrics about this new medium. And in these reports, they said that 75% of consumers sampled across, I believe, 20 countries are interested in using AR to interact with a product before buying. But augmented reality VTO is not new. It's been around for 10 years. I believe Glasses.com was the first retailer in 2013 who shipped an iOS app with a very rudimentary AR VTO functionality. That company was later bought by Luxottica. Luxottica's premium brand, Ray-Ban, launched another iOS app in 2014 for eyewear to try on, and then brought the same technology to the browser in 2016. Gucci, the probably biggest and most iconic luxury brand, integrated iOS in their app, an AR VTO functionality in 2019. But it was only until really the pandemic that kicked in and forced all the stores globally to shut down that we saw this technology really transform in terms of perception from a gimmicky nice to have to an essential tool that is now part of the omni-channel strategy and digital transformation across some of the largest brands and retailers. They include IKEA, Walmart, Amazon, Dolce & Gabbana, Crocs, Adidas, Diesel, and the list is almost endless. With the panelists here, which are leaders in this field, we're going to try and uncover some of the best practices, case studies, and success stories behind this technology, which I believe will be pervasive in the next 5 years in every company that sells goods online. So without further saying, I would like the panelists, please, to introduce yourself, what you do in your company, and what the company does. Maybe, Felipe, if you can start.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Marco, for the invitation. Very, very happy to be here with you all. My name is Felipe. I'm head of open innovation at Farfetch, which is a team that is testing and scaling new growth opportunities in partnership with startups. One of these opportunities has been digital fashion that, as you mentioned, has accelerated tremendously, especially during COVID. And more recently, I've been closely involved in the acquisition of One, which is one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known company in 3D and AR for the luxury industry.
Brilliant. Thank you. Nice to be here. My name is David Randle. I'm the global head of go-to-market for spatial computing at Amazon Web Services. I've been dealing with 3D as a transformative medium for over 16 years, helping create kind of 3D and immersion as the next pervasive human-machine interaction. I obviously didn't get the white top, black pants memo, so excuse me for that. But I tried another alternative, so good to be here.
Thanks.
So first of all, it's so nice to be here today with all of you. My name is Zehra, and I've been working at Art Labs for over a year and a half now as the marketing lead. And for those of you who are not familiar with Art Labs, we are a tech company that provides scalable 3D visualization, augmented reality, and virtual try-on solutions for e-commerce and the metaverse.
So we have key players that are all acting in the ecosystem at different points. And the first question for all of you is, does augmented reality virtual try-on deployed into an e-commerce website or app really work? Any of you?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to start on this one. So we started looking at the digital fashion opportunity in around 2019. This is pre-pandemic, right? We were still trying to understand, would this actually be enhancing to the luxury experience? Because at Farfetch, we are the platform for luxury. So that means that in terms of expectations of realism and quality, this is something that is very meaningful to brands because we are representing these luxury brand products. What we realized since then is a lot has happened. There's a lot of developments. And through our testing, we've been testing the technology since 2020. We have been able right now to actually really understand that AR is not only great from an advertisement point of view, but is actually driving not only engagement, higher engagements of products, but also higher sales. And I think that's been something that it took us some time to get to these results. We now have thousands of assets available online, but the fact that the friction to produce these experiences is reducing, allows us to actually have now broader coverage of our catalog and allows us to know the numbers and really understand that it's quite impactful. So to give you a sense of customer demand right now, in our products with virtual try-on enabled, we have 1 in each 5 users engaging and trying the experience.
With the functionality.
Exactly, and this is driving more sales. So I think that's the exciting part, is now we are able to have the right dot connection because we have the right scale as well.
David, you are obviously the enabler of thousands of these VTO experiences and more. What's your perspective?
Yeah, to build on what Filippa said, I mean, the data is starting to look really interesting in terms of both conversion, enablement, and access to these utilities and these experiences, all the way up to, let's say, 100% increase in conversion from some of our partners and the brands that they enable as well. Before going into that detail, though, it might be interesting for us to set a spectrum around VTO as well, which is quite an umbrella term, right? For VTO, it could mean a hard good, right, on your wrist, right, like a piece of jewelry or a piece, an item on your body here. It could be shoes. There's also the soft good VTO, and I think we'll talk a little bit more in detail about what it takes to traverse that spectrum. But I think the data we see is heavily based on what's accessible today, which are these kind of hard and hybrid goods, let's say.
Exactly. It works. Obviously, you serve a lot of customers in the space on the 3D model creation. So you have a perspective also from the input data that has to go into these engines. But I believe you also guys have a similar solution.
Yeah, and I believe simply saying it works doesn't even do it justice. At Art Labs, we are working with global retailers and marketplaces, and especially during our POCs, we are continuously performing various A/B tests. And I can definitely say that there is a significant improvement in key e-commerce performance metrics, like conversion rates. And to be more clear, we are talking about double-digit increases in conversion rates here. And the brands can be surprised sometimes by how easy and smooth this whole process is actually, because they might have some preconceived opinions about how to do this fast and at scale. But overall, I believe virtual try-on is not only a marketing move that's nice to have, but rather an effective e-commerce solution for every business. It's not only a simple Snapchat or Instagram filter. We are talking about a completely new shopping experience on your product pages at every step of your customer journey, from product discoveries to actually making the purchase. Think of it this way. Today, it's absurd to not have 2D product images on your websites or mobile applications. And soon, it will be almost unacceptable to not have 3D visualizations of your products and to not offer augmented reality and virtual try-on experiences on your platforms. This is the future that we foresee here at Art Labs, that every brand will have a digital version of their products, and they will showcase them in AR with virtual try-on. And it will become the gold standard for marketplaces and retailers as well. How can you be so sure, you may ask? Recently we started the work with one of the largest footwear brands in the US, and also completed a successful POC with a leading footwear retailer in the UK. And this clearly shows us that key players are already heading in this direction, and soon others will follow as well in order not to fall behind the competition.
Absolutely. We talked briefly about advertising. My background is in advertising, actually. We've seen a lot of these brands testing, dipping their toes into maybe lenses on Snapchat or similar. But there doesn't seem to be then a continuity to bring this solution in a sort of persistent, always-on manner into their e-commerce channels. Do you think it's just because they don't see enough data, because it's a lot easier to get a campaign booked with some AR functionality rather than bringing this solution into the website, or what could be the barrier that prevents those brands to move on the ad campaign with try-on and bring the solution into their stack?
I can put a perspective on that because it, I think, transcends most of the industry.
Yeah.
And it's really a content problem. I think what we're seeing is the pipelines for translating content into value, both in terms of VTO or other use cases across retail as well, be it virtual stores or product preview in the browser, you name it. It all comes back to content being the key bottleneck. And within industries like retail, CPG especially, that have maybe not had a big advantage around leveraging 3D across their business in the past, like automotive or healthcare, life science, manufacturing, et cetera, it's kind of even more of a challenge. In fact, we kind of liken what's happening now to the advent of video on the web, circa late 90s, early 2000s. Getting a video on the web was a challenge, right? Many different codecs, different browsers supported different video types. The quality differentiation was pretty tremendous, you name it. And 3D amplifies a lot of that technicality, right? Those technical gaps as well. And so as retailers start to think about how do we meet the demand of our customers and start to push on the ROI that's starting to show with these experiences, it all comes back to how do we do this more? How do we operate at scale? How do we create more automation around these pipelines to provide this content to our various channels? And to me, that's the bottleneck that we see.
Yeah. And talking about ROI, Filippa, obviously, Farfetch has been a pioneer in many aspects when it comes to fashion and innovation. You guys were one of the first multi-brand retailer to bring these technologies from one of the leading provider, Wanna, into Farfetch.com. But you took a considerable step forward and decided to acquire that company. Can you elaborate a bit more about the rationale behind that acquisition and what you see as a kind of future development of those experiences?
Yes, sure. So pretty much Farfetch is highly investing in innovation as a platform company. And we really act as a bridge between the luxury industry and emerging technologies. What we realize is we are not only, of course, working for today, but we are also working for tomorrow's opportunity as part of our luxury new retail strategy. And AR is really been the perfect bridge between the physical world and the digital world. And pretty much it's making this 2D flat e-commerce experience into a 3D, highly personalized, interactive experience that highly connects with the younger demographics, which Farfetch actually over-indexes towards. With this in mind, the acquisition basically accelerates our opportunities in terms of how can we scale the technology and what can we offer to the industry as we develop our platform to meet and evolve in terms of what's the expectations, both from customers and from brands. We're very excited about not only what we have today available, but what are the new categories that will have incredibly immersive experiences as well. And the acquisition of Wanna will allow the company to double down and just go faster on some of this category expansion and, of course, the scaling opportunity for the industry.
So we aren't there yet in terms of having all items in, let's say, the whole kind of fashion luxury vertical. There's only certain categories. There's obviously an input bottleneck by the 3D modeling and the 3D assets, but there's also limitation in terms of what a mobile browser can do in terms of computation, right, David? So you want to elaborate a little bit more about what are the challenges in order to have fully realistic, full body try-on experiences through the smartphone, for example?
Yeah. I mean, you look at what it takes to deliver an immersive experience today based on the content that's available today, and I think that's largely executable on device, right, on a mobile device or a lightweight wearable. Unfortunately, consumers have an insatiable appetite for more, better. And if we bet on what's going to happen with content delivery to create these more immersive experiences and drive things like real-time simulation of fabric on a body fit, right, to increase that level of confidence for consumers, that takes an enormous amount of both compute power and visual capability as well. So I think what we're going to see is a bit of a transition from these workloads being on device to being provided from the cloud, right, in order to run those simulations, generate those pixels, we say, and then deliver those pixels to the right person at the right time on whatever device they're on. That's also true for metaverse-type experiences on retailers' websites that bring together a much larger data set, typically, much larger variance in types of content, much deeper immersion, meaning higher resolutions, multiple device capabilities. All of that's driving more visual compute to the cloud. And again, one of the challenges I think we see that we're anchored on is how to solve that problem, right? So let's solve the content problem. Let's solve the how do you get content to people's eyeballs as a next step.
And talking about content, I mean, I obviously worked with some of these luxury clients, primarily luxury, that were interested in integrating these solutions. And when it comes to 3D assets, I believe there's three major barriers that interest them: is the quality, the volume, and the speed at which these assets are produced. It's been historically a very capital or work-heavy task, but there's obviously a lot of innovation now also when it comes to the automation and to really the industrialization without sacrificing the quality.
Exactly. Great point. So let's talk about some major bottlenecks and barriers here. So everyone can create a great 3D model if it's only a single product. But if you want to digitize your whole catalog fast, because we know that every second is important in e-commerce, that's where things get complicated. And as I mentioned before, brands can be hesitant at first because they believe in order to digitize their products and be a part of the metaverse, they need to have an army of 3D artists, invest millions of dollars, or put months or years of effort into the asset creation process, like building a professional studio for scanning, for example. As you also mentioned, there are mainly three main bottlenecks here. One, the volume, how to do this at scale. Two, the quality, how to meet photorealistic 3D standards. And finally, the cost, how much will it cost, and will there be enough return on investment, which may be the most important factor for many businesses, I believe.
Yeah, it's very difficult to find a sweet spot in terms of this triangle, right?
Yes, exactly. But actually, there are simple solutions to each bottleneck here. You don't have to allocate big budgets or assign large teams. In our case, if you have 3D models of your products, we can optimize them and lower file sizes up to 95% without any quality loss by leveraging computer graphics methods and making them AR ready. And if you don't, that's also okay. Here we are using the latest photogrammetry techniques to 3D scan your products without the need for a single 3D artist, which is huge. And all a client has to do once their asset is ready is to click on a simple publish or unpublish button on their content management system, sit back and watch the results, and that's it. And soon it will be even possible to generate 3D models from a few images thanks to the latest developments in artificial intelligence like neural radiance fields, and we are pushing really hard on that.
Excellent. And talking about on the business side of things, so we're talking about these technologies which are highly innovative for the vast majority of customers. And so the stakeholders who are managing the budgets and approving these technologies, they tend to move cautiously. So very often they want to start with a pilot, proof of concept. In each of your B2B business lines, what are the key factors to win clients over the line? Is it just about pure pricing, or is it just about predictability of the budget, or is it about other variables that you've encountered in dealing with your B2B customers?
Yeah, I think for the specifically where we operate within the luxury industry, although pricing is always important.
Is always important. Even if you're talking with a 10 billion luxury house, they always try to squeeze you.
I would say the realism is the number one reason when the luxury brands decide to partner with Farfetch and Wanna. They really want their products to be well represented, and they really see these experiences as the perfect medium for that storytelling. So the realism is number one. Then our industry, it's highly seasonal as well. So there's of course carryovers, so items that brands repeat every year.
Yeah.
But there is a subset of newness and seasonal items where it's very, very important to have these assets available. not at the end of the collection, right, but at the beginning of the season. So in terms of how long does it take from selecting the items into having that 3D asset available and that experience available as well, that's key, especially on seasonal items. So having that predictability and that fast turnaround on content is
But the key factor is on realism, probably more than any other aspect. I guess.
Number one.
Realism of the model and also of the experience in terms of tracking, load times, etc.
Exactly. It has to be smooth. It has to be beautiful. It needs to represent the product in the best way. And I think customers, they expect fast experiences, right? Because they have benchmarks with other ways to explore AR, right? When you go to Snapchat, for example. So pretty much they expect that level of smooth experience when they come and they engage with AR in an e-commerce platform. What is very interesting is we are seeing the loading times just get smaller and smaller as the technology progresses. Mm-hmm. So it's already engaging today for the client. They're already ready for it. They love it. Absolutely. As is, and it's just going to get better. So I think that's exciting.
And it feeds into, I think, what we're seeing as well, which is, a piece of criteria evaluated by the business is economies of scale. Right. So as they start to see pretty quick return on investment, which I know Neha will talk about, what we see is that insatiable appetite to double down on what works, especially in a market that's shifting very aggressively, and digital experiences are becoming even more valuable to the brands to offer to their customers. And so when it comes to economies of scale, you have to think about, okay, let's evaluate this methodology for a category, a subset of a category, and how do we start to drive not just repeatability around cost, which is starting to get quite interesting, actually. I mean, we've gone just in a couple of years from typically 1,000 or plus, to create an individual asset. We now have partners that are able to deliver that for sub $100 per asset, and that's just over a couple of years, and that's going to continue to be driven lower, especially with advancements in AI, ML, and automations as well. So brands see that happen, and then they see, how do we do this now for all of our categories? How do we take into account the seasonality of our product lines, which requires them to start to think about economies of scale. So we see the cost pressure, but we also see technologies that are bringing that cost down pretty tremendously. I mean, a 10x decrease, right, in just a couple of years is pretty tremendous, and I think we'll see that again in just a couple of years.
And so for all your customers, which are scale-up startups, developers of these technologies, the ability to basically match the demand that comes from their end customers and scale depending on how much users engage is probably the critical factor.
That's right, yeah.
And for our clients, I would say the real value is return on investment. And we
How do you justify that?
Yeah, we measure the real value by looking at project ROIs. Okay. And it's quite important for especially like retailers and marketplaces. And our POCs showed us that 2 to 5 times return on investment is actually possible here. And not only ROIs, as I mentioned before, AR and Virtual TryOn also have significant effects on other e-commerce metrics as well. Mm-hmm. Take product returns, for example. According to 2021 Snap Consumer AR report, product returns are actually a $550 billion problem that AR and VTO can help fix, which is also an important metric for our clients. And there are also some hidden value propositions as well, like allocating that budget and team to your other needs, which saves brands a lot of time and helps you to prioritize other areas of your business. Like as you can see, there are various benefits of AR and VTO. All brands have to do is be proactive and take the first step by digitizing their products for the future of 3D commerce. And I believe the best part is by doing so, they will have a future-proof, interoperable 3D library that can be used to generate additional revenue incomes in the next days with the upcoming metaverse trend.
And to add what Neha is saying as well, it's amazing to see sometimes retailers that are very easy to invest in their prototype processes, right? The fabric choices, sending, shipping items all over the world for approvals, for processing, for essentially creating what will ultimately become the garment at scale, right? The garment in production. And to think that a small equivalent of that process invested into a 3D representation of that asset, when done right and when done in a scalable fashion, is a fraction of even the prototype cost, right, for generating that garment in the first place. And sometimes when positioned that way, we start to see a bit of a light bulb go off. Especially, as these pipelines mature, the ability for brands and producers to create that 3D representation at the time of production versus after the fact will only aid in kind of the ability for them to scale these operations and deliver a better total cost of ownership as well.
Absolutely. And beyond the aspects of the experience, like the realism of the product, Philippa, when it comes to the business aspect, there's obviously a reduced number of vendors globally that offer high-quality VTO solution. Obviously, one is fully integrated in Farfetch. Do you think that also the commercial model, like offering them a flat fee, like a subscription model, is something that gives them reassurance in terms of not having huge costs if they have a spike in traffic? For example, there's different models available, but have you encountered that giving these luxury brands the guarantee that whatever they pay will stay, pretty much fixed throughout the year is also an advantage for them?
Yes, I think that is definitely an advantage and an incentive for them to scale, which is where we think is the opportunity, right? Is going from the 20, 30 SKUs to actually having wider catalog. So having that predictability is great. But we talked before about return on investment, and I think one of the unique opportunities that the collaboration and integration between one and the Farfetch group is that before a luxury brand would be producing assets just to their brand.com or their app and make that assets available only for their direct-to-consumer clients. Today, because of the collaboration and the one opportunity, we actually make those assets available through Farfetch applications as well. So an asset that before would be leveraged for a tinier audience is now actually being embedded on multiple channels. So the return on investment that brands will see will dramatically increase as well.
From a business model perspective, we're seeing an interesting pivot as well within the partners we serve, which is to not index on the cost of the 3D representation of the product, right? Because that's the status quo. It's more about the value that that asset creates. So what ends up happening is you can start to think about new business models that index more on the results that that asset creates, whether it's conversion or dwell time on that asset or addition of extra items into the basket because they were inspired by something. Right? Those are all actually the results that the brand and the retailer is looking for. The 3D asset is what empowers that, but if you detach the business model from having to invest in the 3D from the results that it creates, it becomes pretty interesting. So we have some partners that are really pushing the limits of that model.
Yeah, and the concept of interoperability of these three models is a huge topic now. We shouldn't talk about the word metaverse because there's a lot of fatigue with that. But inevitably, all these three models at the moment, can theoretically fit into NFT, into a branded world, into a multiplayer gaming, into a kind of web-based 3D immersive shopping, into a VTO. But the reality is that it's highly fragmented. So I think this standardization, as you said, in the video example, will be key, I think, to unlock thousands of clients kind of really embracing 3D as a new medium in e-commerce.
There is, I totally agree, and I think within retail CPG, there's almost a LeapFrog opportunity. If you look at discrete manufacturing as kind of a source of inspiration for how they've established 3D pipelines and repeatability to actually deliver immersive experiences at scale, there's still maybe, call it 20%, 25% in this kind of long-term journey towards being a true 3D native organization, let's say. And within retail, it's even less than that. But a lot of what's been learned in those industries is being applied to retail, and I think there's much more efficiencies being created there as well. But this idea of creating, what we see working in discrete manufacturing is this notion of a spatial data lake, right? That sits across their organization. And that allows for the creation, storage, representation, distribution of content to support immersive experiences, whether it's for a brand website or a metaverse experience or an NFT. Doesn't really matter, right? And that shouldn't care about the endpoint of, or the channel, right, of that asset. But investing into that layer where this becomes a managed and organized exercise within an organization we're starting to see it provide a lot of value, right? Amplified value to each line of business within an org that needs that. And by the way, 3D is also valuable beyond sales and marketing, right? You think about training, you think about operations, you think about manufacturing,
Absolutely.
right? And these assets can be used across all those lines of business. And so when you talk to, the C-suite or the board members about why this is impactful, not only is something interesting happening with the demographic of Gen Z, right, becoming more native for these experiences. In fact, to build on something Neha said, I think a statistic I saw recently is that about 63% of Gen Zs expect products when they're shopping, they expect products to be available through preview, right? Through a product preview or a virtual try-on. And so that behavior shift is changing. So there's the pull for this type of content and experience. Now what the C-suite needs to look at is how do we push that and how do we create economies of scale in our organization to provide these experiences?
And I believe you guys are also kind of doing some projects in the NFT space.
Yes,
And also
exactly,
precisely in the ability for create once and deploy in multiple destinations, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Interoperability is something that we are heavily working on at the moment. And soon with our new tool, ArtLab Studio, clients will be able to upload their 3D models in bulk. And with just one click, they will get their optimized 3D files that can be used in different virtual worlds. Because as we all know, each virtual world has a different needs. You can't use the same file in, for example, in Decentraland or in Sandbox. So it will be a lifesaver, I would say.
And cost saver.
Yeah, and cost saver, exactly.
And I think what Art Labs is doing is an example of how that functionality can sit within a certain department or organization that leverages this data that's standardized across the board, right, to deliver these experiences at much higher velocity, let's say.
Amazing. I think we have time for some kind of final remarks. Where are we heading in the next 5 years with these technologies? Each of you, if you can elaborate a little bit, what do you expect to happen across technologies, new devices maybe?
Yeah, I do think like our focus is pretty much continuing to develop these experiences within high realism. That's our positioning. But where we want it to go is the scale, right? And the new categories and going and surpassing some of the challenges that we still have on categories such as clothing, for example, right? So that represents a big chunk of business within the luxury industry. So what we hope happens is the scale, but also that this goes from a subset of 3 or 4 categories into actually being something that can be available across multiple categories.
And there's always the intersection, which at the moment isn't available on the categories that we cover, especially footwear, but there's intersection not only to be able to try realistically 3D models, but also to have an accurate match for the size. So size predictability is another area that we haven't talked about, but ultimately they will converge.
It's already happening. So some of the AR experiences are already embedding some of the size and fit elements because we understand that's kind of like, what is the role of this technology? Where can it help solve client challenges and barriers to shop online? So that's already coming in the soon iterations to happen. And it's definitely, as we talked before, there's a focus on how to use these technologies for profitability, right, and to enhance companies' profitability. So all this area about size and fit returns is something that it's already in the next iteration of experiences.
David, your background is industrial design. We talk a lot about sell, but like any other kind of use cases that you see these technologies as those that you mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, even beyond use cases, I think there's so much opportunity unfolding here when you think about personalization, right, and what's needed as the market starts to demand, right, more personalized items, more personalized experiences, which then puts a lot of pressure on volume of content that needs to be delivered, managing that content, et cetera. So I think that idea of supporting mass customization is very interesting. I think the advent of what AI/ML is enabling as well. I mean, I don't know if you saw the previous talk about what Stable Diffusion is able to unlock. So again, delivering this throughput of new experiences and new content is pretty amazing. VTO for soft goods and kind of accurate fit is another area, which is, by the way, I think
it will take some time, I guess, until it gets to prime time.
Yeah, it will totally take some time, and I mean that's a hard problem. I mean that's on like the more difficult end of the spectrum versus hard goods or hybrid goods, let's say, which are on the other end of the spectrum, which I think is moving into scale out mode as we speak. Yeah, and I mean, when I talk about assets, by the way, right, that's the intent is to feed a variety of different user experiences. So when you think about use cases, whether it's metaverse experiences on the web, whether it's NFTs and decentralized experiences, whether it's product preview on a website, whether it's a virtual store, virtual fashion shows, right, you name it, right, all of that will be consuming virtual assets, right, versus historically the physical assets.
Sarah?
And I also believe that real-time 3D rendering will be so important in the near future, and especially with the latest developments in hardware, like AR glasses, we'll be seeing digital twins everywhere, almost like buy one, get one for your avatar. And this will not only change our digital identities, but also the way we represent ourselves in real world as well. And I'm so excited for that.
That's another huge topic that,
I know, right?
Days.
Yeah.
I think we have, we just 1 minute high, but I think we should start maybe and give the audience some questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, all of you. Marco, Zahra, Dave, and Philippa, you were all great. So much insights to this quite complex but very promising area. I have some questions, but I'd rather have the audience ask yours.
Many of you guys talked about the importance of ROI to these brands. I'm wondering kind of what is the best way to show that? Is it through comparing it through other marketing campaigns, click-through rates,
Excellent.
Stuff like that?
Excellent question.
Yeah,
Philippa,
so
maybe you want to go?
for us, we started as light as you can imagine, just during in 2020, just small tests with this very selected number of SKUs, and at that time, we're pretty much looking at metrics such as add to wish list, add to bag, GTV, so basically sales for us. And now we are in a position where what we do is we A/B test, right? And this has been like for us the right way of measuring is looking at how many more sales is this experience driving when our customers have it available versus customers that do not have it available. And then we look, of course, at the cost.
So you're just comparing product page standard without VTO, product page with VTO.
It's a bit more like now we're so invested in it that it's pretty much, we have different ways to, for example, flesh out that the product has virtual try-on. So for example, in a product listing page, in a catalog, you may see if you are on the version with virtual try-on, a label of virtual try-on. So it's pretty much a version. Some people have a version where there is a journey that includes virtual try-on elements, and there's another control group that doesn't have any elements of that journey.
Okay, excellent.
Yep, good.
Question sort of building on that a little bit. So, Dave, you mentioned how the price of video came down, so it used to be really sort of logistically challenging, and also the cost was kind of high, and then that really came down. And you're sort of applying that now to VTO. But one of the things that you mentioned, Philippa, was that hyper-realism is really important. So when you look at sort of video as a medium, and I look at sort of retailers and brands, I would say on the whole, they haven't done a great job at really understanding how to use video content and operationalize that within their organizations to manage it well. So do you think that that kind of VTO and these kind of 3D modeling is just going to leapfrog that, and it's going to sort of force them to get into that stage? Are they going to kind of get it together with video, which is already hyper-realistic? Or do we kind of need like a whole new kind of just pure environment marketplace of sorts where, people who want to do these types of experiences can do it so that you don't have to rely on, the retailers and brands totally getting it together in order to kind of, complete the experience?
Excellent.
The view I see on that is, I think we're closer to the LeapFrog example you touched on. There's been enough of kind of, socioeconomic dynamics that have shifted over the past 5 years that have really resonated with leaders of organizations in terms of how they can use digital, right, to advance and make their brands and make their services, their products more relevant for the emerging audiences. And I think that fire is what's really lighting or being lit under these types of experiences for the first time. Not to mention, paired with a broader understanding of how other industries have started to leverage this and kind of gain traction, is also something that's being looked at from the retail CPG area. Like most mediums, right, when a new medium comes out, the previous don't go away. So I can't speak to, how video will continue to be important, right, as a touch point or as an asset for a brand to represent themselves or for consumers to represent themselves as well. But 3D, we predict, is going to be by far, right, the next mass medium.
Yeah, for us, it's pretty much as well in terms of growth. When we look at what are the new growth opportunities, we just see digital fashion and 3D as a much larger opportunity looking at the future versus video. The commercial opportunities that come from one 3D asset and what that can represent are just so much larger and so much more flexible that pretty much that's one of the reasons why we are very focused on this space.
Excellent.
Thank you. Very good answers. Interesting discussion. We have time for a few more.
I have another question for you, Dave. So you said something about like cloud computing, outsourcing maybe the rendering power through pixel streaming, I guess. Do you think the cost in the future will come down? Because right now it's quite expensive to do that on a large scale, right?
Yeah, and I think the answer is absolutely, right? There's two dynamics at play. One is the pull for those types of experiences. The other is what's happening by the suppliers, let's say, right, of the infrastructure to create these experiences at scale. When I talk to industries outside of retail CPG, that's kind of one of it more or less is the number one topic right now, which is how do we start to achieve economies of scale by delivering pixels from cloud to end users, regardless of use case or application. One thing as an organization I think we're quite proud of is that we continue to reduce our prices of our services. And so if you look at that trend moving forward, that's going to be true of every category that we start to expand our infrastructure into. But yeah, this idea of how do we allow our customers and partners to generate pixels at the most affordable rate and at the largest scale possible is a huge focus of ours.
I think there was someone else.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. There's a thing that you don't.
We actually.
Sorry, I need to repeat the question for the rest of us. I think it's about categories.
Which categories Virtual TryOn is currently available beyond footwear and.
Yes. So at Farfetch.com, we have made it available for several types of shoes, not only sneakers anymore. Watches Virtual TryOn, where we've also seen outstanding metrics in terms of sales when products are enabled, and also beauty. Beyond this, we have partnered with Snapchat in their launch last year, where they announced at the Snap Summit their clothing 3D Virtual TryOn. That does not mean that the stage of maturity for all categories is the same, but it means that everyone that is highly investing in Virtual TryOn is doing their bets, of course, in expanding categories. We also have done it for jewelry as well, such as bracelets.
And makeup, it's not clothing,
Exactly.
but it's something that you still wear. It's a massive category with leaders such as Perfect Corp, and I think you guys
Yeah,
also
we
have.
also have that experience. So pretty much we acknowledge that It's still not possible to have it for all the categories that we would love to have, but there is new categories coming in right now every 3 to 6 months. So I think that's very, very fast-paced.
We have time for one more?
Yeah, sure. We have time for one more.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much and congratulations for this panel. Do you already see some companies already shifting their budget from photo shoots and video shoots and using 3D to showcase their products?
Yeah, exactly. Because every day the customer expectations are going higher and higher. And soon they will get bored of seeing the same product in different angles, you know. And AR makes it so easy to fasten the customer decision-making process. So there's definitely a shift in that area.
Yeah, and adding, the problem to that process is that very often the cost is compared. So they compare the cost to do a model to a video, and obviously the math doesn't add up, but that's not how it should be looked at, because there's obviously many more benefits that a 3D model can add. But yeah, I think it's a process that's going to take some time.
It's amazing because what you're going to be able to do is that if you have metrics about the client-specific question, you can showcase and tailor the model.
One nugget I'll give is a partner of ours who provides a platform for creating 3D representations at scale and other capabilities for retailers as well. Their largest growth area is around synthetic content generation to replace photography, right? So they've essentially trained now the industry to say, okay, I have this 3D representation of my product now. Beyond VTO, what else can I do with this? And so that's a clear indication that they're starting to see not just the ROI, but they're starting to be trained in new processes that start to augment their dependencies on traditional photography as well. And I mean, this is something I personally had predicted 16 years ago, and it's funny how it's taken, you know, more or less 12 plus years for that to start to become a bit more realized. But, yeah.
Oh, I feel awful. We don't have much time, but for a very quick question. And that's the final one. Sorry, guys. I'm sure these guys will be here, and you can ask them privately.
Okay, big question, short answer. And now we're talking about virtual try-on for e-commerce, but it feels like we're going to old school e-commerce sites, meaning images and photos and product descriptions, all of that. And so right now we're in a situation where we can try the product that's in the store, but we cannot go to the store. What do you think the future of an AR store online will feel like? Not trying things, but the actual store.
Do you mind repeating?
What AR basically can play in a physical store.
No. How do we take the experience of the physical store and put that online?
Yes, I mean, I can speak to this briefly. I think an emerging use case that we're supporting is this notion of virtual stores, right? So beyond the traditional 2D product page that you would normally interact with any brand online with today, right, mobile and online, they're starting to look at how do we deliver an experiential space that represents our brand, everything from the decor we choose, right, the plants, the lighting, the way we arrange our clothing, right, the spirit of the brand, which really gets lost on a 2D product page, right? How does that get represented in 3D? So again, it's just another asset type that's providing an immersive experience, and yeah, we're seeing quite an uptick in how companies that provide these solutions are leveraging our infrastructure to deliver these experiences as well.
Yeah, the approach we're seeing from luxury brands and from Farfetch, from our tests, has been less about representing the physical store online. It has been more about what are new ways and virtual worlds play a part in this to represent the brand. And usually they are very different than the store representation. So the expectation is about representing the brand and their world, but that is not actually replicating the physical store. That is about replicating a completely surprising experience for the clients. It's a new angle. It's not exactly the same perspective. And we've tested this with Burberry. maybe a year ago, where we gave the opportunity for clients to pretty much go into this virtual world, almost like a gamified
It's
experience.
the avatarization of stores, basically, through this thing. You know, they kind of use a different skin to represent.
Completely, yes, that's what we are seeing.
Thank you so much.
Thank
The whole panel has been so interesting. We all now are really wanting more of our shopping experiences online, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure additional questions will be answered off stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.